Have you ever found yourself forming a relationship with someone, all to then realize you're becoming enmeshed with them? This is actually something that I realized recently. And it's wild because that in and of itself means that I'm repeating a pattern, right? And so let's look at the fabric of it. First and foremost, what is enmeshment? Enmeshment is a dynamic in relationships. It's pseudo intimacy, where basically the dynamic is that your shit is their shit is your shit. The connection's very superficial. It's not based around deeper personal things, right? It's more so just based around usually drama and gossip, this, that, and the other. Listening to things that you don't realize you don't care about because you probably never have had more deep personal connection with an individual and you don't know what it's like, so you settle for the pseudo intimacy, right? Um, Also, you find out that if you were to try to change the dynamic of the relationship, it probably wouldn't go very well because the other person's not actually capable of anything beyond enmeshment, right? And so I discovered this for myself recently, with somebody that I met. And I realized that a lot of the dynamics of the relationship were very enmeshed, and I didn't like them, and I didn't want to continue repeating that pattern. Um, and one of the things actually I basically confronted on behalf of it wasn't really a matter of enmeshment, it was more so just a matter of something else. But it is actually very easy to become enmeshed with people, especially if enmeshment is such a dynamic that is so familiar to you, right? If enmeshment is the dynamic in and of itself that you learned, you if what you learned in terms of cultivating and forming relationships was the dynamic of enmeshment, it's likely that you're just going to continue repeating that pattern, right? Oh, you settle for pseudo. None of this stuff is good or bad or right or wrong. It's just not healthy, right? So it's like, oh, you settle for pseudo intimacy. Oh, you listen to this person tell you a bunch of bullshit that you really are genuinely disinterested in hearing or listening to, but because you want them in your presence for whatever reason, because you want this, that, or the other with them, you just tolerate it and you accept it and you allow it, right? And you source so much of your self worth from them, right? Extrinsic self worth, I would argue, is probably a part of enmeshment because, in some way, shape, or form, you're kind of seeing them as an extension of you to fill your void of insecurity. Maybe because, like, if you don't think that you're physically attractive, right? But they are physically attractive. And for that matter, you just want them to be in your presence because they are physically attractive and it makes you feel like maybe you are finally physically attractive because they're in your presence, right? That's just one example, right? Enmeshment is so fucking expansive. It really is. It's in so many different ways. Being involved in each other's shit when it's not healthy. When that person could bring their stuff to somebody else, like a therapist, for instance, and then you wouldn't just be the fucking emotional container. You wouldn't be the emotional punching bag. It wouldn't be an unhealthy dynamic, right? But it's very easy to repeat the pattern of enmeshment and to form that in a relationship, even subconsciously, right? And the beautiful thing about healing is that it's kind of like a back and forth game, right? Like you learn some shit, you go back and forth, right? You learn different things about what it is that you're doing in relationships, and you change things, right? And then you go back to it, and then you go just back and forth until hopefully and finally you're like, nah, fuck that, I'm done with that, right? Um, but yeah, recently I was kind of just like going about the night. I can't remember if it was night or day. And I was like, holy fucking shit. I am repeating a pattern. I am enmeshed with this person, right? And then from there, of course, I can choose to change my approach to the dynamic. I cannot change them. And quite honestly, I'm probably not even going to bring up the whole enmeshed dynamic thing. They're probably not going to fucking get it. Um, and that's just the way that it is. A lot of people don't get it. They're like, enmeshment? What the fuck is that, right? Um, and so instead, what I would choose to do, not saying I'm going to do this, but what I would choose to do is just change my approach as to how I decide to conduct a relationship with them, right? Um, the way that I see it, if you discover, if you've lived through enmeshment, right, especially earlier on in life, right, in a family system, and you're like, I don't want to conduct my relationships that way anymore. The best course of action is to identify it first, right? And if you know enough about enmeshment, if you know enough about enmeshment, as well as how to slow down or moderate your speech, um, you can come to find that the dynamics that you're carrying out in your relationships, or your relationship that is enmeshment, can quickly die out if you do it in a way that has you changing the approach. Now, if the other person just doesn't want anything other than enmeshment, you're not really going to be able to have a relationship with them, whether platonic or romantic, right? And that's okay. That's fine. Um, it might be a little bit painful, but healthy relationships are not painful. Enmeshment is painful because enmeshment is basically the lacking of self autonomously, right? You're not allowed to be your own self in dynamics of enmeshment. You are obligated to be enmeshed with the other person, right? You are obligated to put your shit out on the fucking table and let them fucking taste it, you know? Um, and it only gets unhealthier from there. That's just the reality of it. But yeah, so I found myself enmeshed with this person, and I was like, huh, I don't like that. I'm not going to keep doing that. That's me trying my British accent. It's terrible. But anyway, um, it's not really that terrible. I just wasn't really trying. I was more so having fun with it. Yeah, enmeshment. Once you realize it, and once you realize that you don't want to do it anymore, um, but how easy it is to fall into it, because again, we tend to default to what is comfortable and familiar. And if enmeshment is comfortable and familiar, right, then it's likely that you're just going to fall back into the repetition compulsion of that pattern, right? So let's, before I end this video, let's dive into one last thing real quick. How do you know that you're enmeshed with somebody? You're enmeshed with them when there are a lack of healthy boundaries, when their shit is your shit is their shit, and you feel like you can't be okay unless they're okay, right? It's diffused boundaries. There's just there are no there are either no boundaries there or very permeable boundaries, right? If you discover that you are enmeshed with somebody, but you're trying to heal the pattern of enmeshment, right? Um, if they are familiar with enmeshment, you can bring it up in conversation and communicate your desire, your goal, this, that, and the other, right? If they are not, just take it on yourself to try to change the dynamic for you, not for them, right? Um, like for instance, like if they try to start bringing up drama and gossip and stuff, maybe you can communicate and be like, hey, I'd prefer that our relationship is much more focused on you and I rather than other people, right? Because why are you in a relationship with somebody other than to grow with them, right? I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, they can vent in a healthy way, right? And you can listen, that's fine, you know. um but don't take it on yourself to try to fucking fix or change them. You can be there as a presence to listen to them and ask them, hey, do you want me to listen? Do you want advice? What do you want? right? Because then that also puts it back on you, and then you're just not giving, unsolicited advice. Maybe they just want you to listen. They're not looking for advice, right? Um, the last thing that I would say is to, quite honestly and quite bluntly, get the fuck away from them if you can't have anything beyond an enmeshed dynamic with them, because it's not healthy and it's not going to go in a way that you want to go. And likely what would end up happening is you just further repeat a pattern of trying to change them into being somebody who does not become enmeshed with you, right? And it's not going to work, because the chances that you are a therapist is low. Um, you wouldn't do that for somebody, because that's a boundary violation anyway, in and of itself. Um, yeah, it's very easy to get sucked back into dynamics of enmeshment, especially if it's familiar, right? Um, limit your, well, I shouldn't say limit. Have boundaries. I mean, that's the opposite of enmeshment, right? Boundaries. Have healthy boundaries in your relationship as to what it is that you will do with them, the relationship that you choose to have with them, right? That's the reality of it. That's just the way that it works.